Oh yeah, sure, why not do the sequel while we're at it? Just get it out of the way while we're in the fall cleaning phase, whatever that means. World Heroes 2, originally a 1993 release for the Neo Geo system and eventually ported over to Super Nintendo in 1994 courtesy of Takara, is the sequel to World Heroes, that kooky fighting game of time-traveling fighters and stuff. World Heroes 2 adds 6 new fighters to the previous roster of 8, bringing the total up to 14 fighters, and with a code you could also select the final 2 bosses of the game, rounding it out to a whole 16 fighters! 16! That's the same number of fighters found in Super Street Fighter 2. Hey, we're moving up in the world, so good for them. Right, so World Heroes 1 was ported over to Super Nintendo courtesy of Sunsoft and was more than adequate. Fine even. And for the second outing, we've got Takara taking over and continuing their service of SNK ports to non-Neo Geo hardware, which tends to be hit or miss. But in the case of World Heroes 2, we've got a winner. Honestly, without a basis of comparison to the source material, this may be one of the stronger fighters on Super Nintendo, or at the very least one of the more enjoyable ones. Like in the first game, you have the option of playing a regular one-on-one contest, best of 3 rounds, that sort of thing, the usual fighting game fare, or you can partake in what is dubbed a survival match, which is a drastic retooling of the deathmatch concept of the previous game. As before, you're fighting in specialized arenas with various hazards and obstacles for you to overcome, whether it be saw blades on the floor, electrified rings, that sort of thing. However, one key difference is that your individual health bars are replaced with a singular bar that represents both players. So the idea is to beat your opponent and drain their health from the meter above, upon which there is a 10 count for them to recover when they're knocked down. If they manage to beat the count and recover, they'll gain a boost of health back and the fight continues. If not, you win. Another way of winning is having the most health when time eventually runs out. Either way, you move on to the next fight. This essentially becomes a game of tug-of-war as you're pushing your health's way to victory while your opponent is doing the same to you. I actually like this idea. It's genuinely something different from the usual straightforward fighting shenanigans, becoming more of an endurance test to outlast the other rather than just straight up KOs and stuff, although don't worry, you still have those as well. And you've also got a bit of customization here. Not a whole lot, but it adds a bit to the replay value. Aside from the usual difficulty settings and controller settings, once again you could either stick with the 3-button setup of pressure sensitive punches and kick buttons, or go the 4-button route of 2 punches and 2 kicks. You could also pick from one of the 3 speed settings, which makes fights go by real fast. You can alternate between standard health meters and the seesaw rules of the survival mode, mix and match between modes, that sort of thing. And as an added option, you can mask the meters so that neither player knows how much stamina they have left until the eventual KO occurs, which again could prove to be something of an interesting little piece of business. Whether you choose to use these options or just stick with the default settings is entirely up to you, but the fact that these exist to spice things up a bit is kinda nice. In any event, World Heroes 2 is a pretty solid fighter all around. You've got a varied cast of characters, including some funny new additions like the Budman in a giant mask, or a demon quarterback, or a pirate asshole dude. Pulling off special moves comes across fairly easy. Even Dragon Punch type commands execute without a hitch, which was something of an issue with the first World Heroes on SNES. And with the retooled survival matches and some options to change things around, what we've got is a package that serves as a substantial step above that previous World Heroes offering. And don't get me wrong, the first World Heroes was fine on SNES, but World Heroes 2 feels and plays far better than that game ever did. This is really, really good stuff. And then there's the strange quirk where projectiles can bounce off a block and be reflected back at the source. Not sure if this is a random occurrence or something you could actually pull off, but if it's the latter, hey, it's a nice little counter to any potential fireball spams back when those were a thing. Naturally, World Heroes 2 suffers from the usual sprite and detail reduction drawbacks in the conversion process from Neo Geo to Super Nintendo, and yet somehow 16-year-old Judica Ryoko maintains some semblance of chest jiggle. Oops. But seriously, if you want an example of why World Heroes 2 is a better game on SNES than World Heroes 1, at least from a visual standpoint, this one has a tank smashing through a wall. They didn't need to do that. They could have just plopped the tank in there from the start and save up some space on the cart, but they did that whole presentation because goddamn, we want the Nintendo kids to have as much fun as we are. The visuals are a step above the first game. The stages here are wonderfully weird and deranged, the action is nice and fast even on the lowest speed setting, and despite the usual detail loss and such, the fighters still look pretty good. On a whole, the overall presentation has seen a considerable upgrade over the previous game. And it also helps that World Heroes 2 has a much punchier soundtrack compared to its predecessor, and again, while it sees a bit of a downgrade to 16-bit, it's still a great sounding collection of tunes, varying from fast-paced to moodier pieces, all around great stuff, and even some of the weaker tracks are of an acceptable quality. Sound effects are usual stock sounds of punches, kicks, hit, blows, and stuff. Voice bites are still fairly clear with some mild muffling and echoing for some bits, but nothing that completely kills the game. Right, so yeah, the obvious question. Why play this when the Neo Geo original is available as a hamster release right now? Well, I will counter that with, why are you watching something on a lesser version? Go give the hamsters their money and enjoy your 80k addled SNK boss syndrome, which this version does not have, which therefore it sucks, lols. But for those with more open minds, and within the context of fighting games gracing the Super NES, World Heroes 2 is absolutely tremendous. It doesn't have a group battle mode or a tournament mode or whatever, but it has a nice varied cast of fighters, the gameplay is pretty slick, and there's enough extra options to give the game a little flavor. I mean, credit where it's due, I was pleasantly surprised with this one, and would more than happily consider World Heroes 2 a top-tier SNES fighter, and that's not something I would toss around flippantly, it really is that good. However, the biggest takeaway I got out of this game is that it is most definitely not a game for good boys and girls of many different ages, and that is a miscarriage of justice.
Checkpoint!
Seriously, how did Nintendo of America miss this? She's only 16, you bastards. Or at least she was.